October 27, 1962. Deep beneath the black swelling waves of the Sargasso Sea, three men are trapped inside a suffocating steel tomb. They face a single terrifying choice: unleash a tactical nuclear warhead or hold their fire. Two of them say yes. Only one man stands in their way. Shivering in the dark, breathing poisoned air, he is the final barrier between human civilization and absolute annihilation. Our modern world exists solely because of his quiet refusal. But what if Vasily Arkhipov had broken? What if the suffocating heat and rising panic finally crushed his resolve? What if, gasping for oxygen, he had simply nodded? That single, exhausted nod rewrites human history. It begins with a thermonuclear flash in the Atlantic. It ends with a scarred, frozen planet. In this world, the Cold War doesn't end with a peaceful treaty. It collapses into systemic ruin. Inside the Soviet submarine B-59, the air has turned toxic. It tastes of leaking battery acid, rust, and stale sweat. Carbon dioxide is building up fast, turning the crew's thoughts to mud. On the surface, American destroyers are dropping practice depth charges. To the Americans, these are harmless warning shots, gentle acoustic knocks demanding a surrender. But to the shivering men trapped inside the shaking steel hull, it is the opening salvo of World War III. Captain Valentin Savitsky breaks first. Convinced the war on the surface has already begun, he orders the deployment of their special weapon, a tactical torpedo tipped with a 10-kiloton nuclear warhead. It is designed to vaporize an entire fleet in one blinding flash, but Soviet protocol is absolute. Launching it requires the unanimous verbal consent of the three senior officers on board. Savitsky screams his authorization. Political officer Ivan Maslenikov instantly agrees. All eyes turn to Arkhipov. In this alternate timeline, Arkhipov is too exhausted to fight. Hypoxia has clouded his judgment. He cannot find the breath to argue, and his vision is fading. He looks at his frantic comrades, and he simply nods. Pressurized air hisses. The outer doors swing open. With the press of a single button, the weapon slides cold and silent into the pitch-black depths. On the surface, panic erupts. American destroyers detect a high-speed launch. They don't know it's nuclear, but they know it's lethal. Helmsmen pull hard to evade, but there is no time. The torpedo rips through the water at 45 knots, locked onto the center of the American flotilla. A 10-kiloton tactical warhead detonates beneath the aircraft carrier USS Randolph. The underwater blast unleashes a crushing, unstoppable shockwave and a colossal column of superheated steam. Nearby escort destroyers are instantly shattered. The carrier is devastated. Within minutes, the heart of the American fleet is a radioactive wreck. In Washington, the unthinkable reaches President Kennedy. A Soviet tactical nuclear strike has devastated an American carrier fleet. In 1962, military doctrine left no room for hesitation. Under immense pressure from his generals, Kennedy is forced to assume this is the opening blow of a total Soviet surprise attack. He authorizes immediate, full-scale retaliation. The response is terrifyingly swift. Within minutes, America's nuclear triad roars to life. Atlas and Titan missiles burst from their silos in Montana and North Dakota. In the Mediterranean and the Pacific, Polaris submarines unleash their payloads. Overhead, B-52 bombers on constant airborne alert receive their go codes and bank hard towards Soviet airspace. In Moscow, Premier Nikita Khrushchev receives no warning from his silent submarine. Instead, strategic communications intercept the emergency transmission of America's launch codes. Along the border, frantic air defense stations report hundreds of strategic bombers heading for Soviet airspace. Facing total erasure, Khrushchev orders an immediate counter-launch. Rocket engines ignite across the Urals and Siberia. Multi-megaton warheads rise into the stratosphere, locked onto Washington, New York, and Chicago. Because these are intercontinental missiles, they bypass regional defenses entirely. People in North America look up to see bright, unnatural streaks tearing through the afternoon sky. Air raid sirens wail across the continent. There is nowhere to run. Millions have less than 15 minutes to find shelter before the warheads arrive. The machinery of mutual assured destruction runs on autopilot. The creators have lost control. On the American eastern seaboard, the destruction is absolute. Washington, D.C. is vaporized in a single blinding flash. A 3-megaton airburst flattens the capital, sending a wall of superheated air and shockwaves ripping through Maryland and Virginia. New York City takes multiple hits. Manhattan's skyscrapers act like massive concrete sails, absorbing the kinetic shockwave before collapsing into mountains of pulverized steel. In the Soviet Union, the devastation is even worse. Under the U.S. military plan, over 3,000 targets across the Soviet bloc are systematically vaporized. Moscow, Leningrad, and Kiev are wiped off the map. The energy released in the first 12 hours equals hundreds of thousands of Hiroshima bombs. Within 3 days, the human cost is incalculable. Over 180 million people lie dead across the United States, Europe, the Soviet Union, and China. But the blasts are only the opening act. Colossal firestorms engulf Chicago, London, and Moscow. Millions of tons of irradiated soot rise into the stratosphere, blocking 70% of the sun's light. The temperature plummets. This is not an academic concept. This is a freezing, pitch-black hell. Agriculture across North America and Eurasia vanishes overnight. Crop yields drop to zero. The survivors of the initial blasts now face a silent, creeping killer: global famine. Electromagnetic pulses fry high-voltage transformers, crippling power grids for decades. Without electricity, sanitation, or supply chains, millions freeze in the dark. It is the total systemic collapse of modern industrial civilization. The year is 1980. The Northern Hemisphere is a scarred, irradiated wasteland. The United States is gone, replaced by a fractured patchwork of isolated regional factions. Military remnants hunker deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, desperately trying to project authority over a starving, ruined continent. The Soviet Union is equally shattered, broken into rival warlord states fighting over uncontaminated scraps in Siberia. Yet humanity clings to survival. The Southern Hemisphere, largely bypassed by the direct nuclear exchange, becomes the unexpected guardian of human civilization. Countries like Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, and Australia did not take direct hits. They still suffer the bitter global cooling caused by the northern smoke, and their winters are brutally long, but their agricultural systems manage to hold on. These nations quickly pivot. They form a powerful southern alliance to block waves of northern refugees. The global balance of power completely flips. Without the consumer electronics boom from America and Japan, technological progress stagnates. Soviet regional strikes had already devastated Japan, targeting critical U.S. military hubs in Okinawa and Yokosuka. The Internet is never invented. Society relies on rugged, analog shortwave radio to communicate across oceans. Global energy supplies are decimated as Middle Eastern oil fields lie abandoned or burning. Surviving nations scramble for power, turning to coal, primitive solar, and wind just to keep their lights on. In this timeline, the Cold War does not end with the fall of a wall in Berlin. It ends with a blinding flash in the Atlantic, followed by a long, freezing silence. The global population is slashed by over 60% before the skies finally begin to clear in the late 1980s. The survivors look north with terror. To them, the former superpowers are just radioactive ghosts of a vanished era. All of this was avoided because one man, shivering in a suffocating Soviet submarine, kept his head. Vasily Arkhipov stood his ground against his captain and political officer. He demanded they surface. Because he said no, the world we know survived, cities expanded, the digital age began, and we are here today to talk about it. The next time you look at a map, remember that the borders of our world weren't just drawn by treaties. They were kept intact by a single quiet voice of reason in the dark.